A quick note before we start, don't feed the pirates. This audiobook is currently only approved for listing on Google Play or at the Michelle Fox Paranormal Romance and Urban Fantasy channel on YouTube. For a full list of official outlets, visit authormfox.com and click the audiobook tab. Be sure to subscribe to Michelle Fox's official YouTube channel to access more free audiobooks. Enjoy! Summer in Cleveland had all the charm of Satan's butthole, but I like to eat and my mom charged me rent, so I showed up for work. Even though the temp had hit 90 by 8 a.m. Even though the heat was on schedule to top 100 before noon. Even though I had to wear jeans and a jacket for my job. Any other witch would have called off and gone swimming, or magicked a deep freeze on their naked bits. But not me. I was Sylvie Orion, witch worker bee. Owned and operated by the Triad. Also, the deep freeze magic thing didn't work for me. Of course, if I'd known work had blast from the past Mean Girls on the menu, I might have reconsidered. Plug-in AC worked fine, and I'd rather be chilling with some witch wine than dodging spells from someone I'd hoped to never see again. Frenchmen. Can I get a "so mote it be"? What were the odds of Lydia Petty showing up on the wanted list anyway? I frowned up at her. When she'd caught sight of me, she'd scuttled like a spider high up in the warehouse shelving. Well, now that I thought back to our high school days, I had to admit the odds were probably better than average. Today was proof of that. "Lydia, just come down," I said, holding up my hands in a "we're all adults here, let's be reasonable" gesture. We were in her brand new warehouse, full of illegal magic. The one she'd opened after being busted 3 months ago. I'd been pleased that finding her had been fairly simple. She'd posted her own bail, so I didn't have the usual tracking charm that made my job easy. But with a little Google foo, I'd discovered she'd set up the company with her mother's name, proving once again that most criminals aren't that smart. It had taken me 5 minutes to zero in on her location, but now she was making this hard. "Not happening, you worm of a witch." Lydia swung her stiletto-clad feet and smiled down at me from her perch atop 20-foot metal shelving. I wasn't about to go up there and wrestle with her. I didn't mind a little tussle, but not at that height. I wiped sweat off my face and attempted a pleasant smile. "It's hotter than Dragon Balls in the desert. Come down and we'll grab a milkshake and catch up. We haven't seen each other since what? High school graduation." I didn't say anything about the police station or court. Those words made people run or fight. Pro tip: use positive language and incentives when hauling people to jail. Also, I'd probably buy us milkshakes for real. Being a bounty hunter didn't make me a monster. This heat was insane. Criminals and law enforcement alike deserved a cold treat. "Make me," Lydia snarled at me. I sighed and stared at her, pondering the best way to gain her cooperation. She looked just as I remembered, oval high cheekbone face, pouty lips and dark eyes that sparked with malice. Even the fancy business suit couldn't hide her mien, but it did show a trim, fit physique. She could probably still fit into her dress from the high school witches' ball. I thought about pushing over the shelving to wipe the smirk off her face, but that might kill her, and she wasn't classified as dead or alive. Yet. I said, "Make me." Lydia picked up a cardboard box and lobbed it in my direction. The box landed with a dull thud on the floor in front of me. I met her gaze and raised my eyebrows. "Really?" Lydia gave a muffled shriek, furious that she'd missed. Assault of a bounty hunter carries a hefty penalty from the Triad, you know. Curious, I lifted the cardboard flap of the box with the toe of my boot, revealing neon blue charms inside. By my estimate, there were hundreds of them. A matching blue logo on the side of the box labeled the contents as Montster O. Yes, that O. The O every woman fakes at least once. Lydia had set up a supply chain for the real deal. and she was attacking me with what had to be a lethal dose. Should I call the witches' council? The question came from the receptionist. She tried to stop me at the door and then had trotted after me as I barreled into the warehouse. Now she hovered, her brow furrowed with concern. Go ahead, I said at the same time Lydia screeched no. The receptionist looked confused. I pulled the paperwork out of my back pocket. I have a warrant. If the council comes, they're working for me. Not you. No council. They'll shut me down. Lydia glared at her receptionist. I nodded my agreement and considered calling them myself. They'd hustle her right down off her perch, drag her sorry ass to the police, and done, but then I'd lose money. The miserable summer heat made the idea really tempting though. Sweat pooled at the small of my back and my socks felt wet in my steel toe boots. My working clothes were a sauna made of torture in the summer, but I bruised less when I covered up. Okay. The receptionist looked at me wide-eyed, totally out of her league. Sweat gleamed on her face. She was the type that glowed, whereas I looked like I'd been slavered on by a horny bear shifter. Which actually happened. Once. I'd rather not discuss it. Thanks. You should leave, I said to the receptionist. I swiped a hand across my forehead, keeping the sweat from trickling into my eyes, and gestured to the door. Before you get caught up in this. Don't you dare listen to her. Lydia's voice shrieked down on us. I sign your paycheck, Rosa, and you stay right there. You're a witness to a crime. What crime? I rolled my eyes. Harassment. Assault. Battery. Ah. I nodded. We'd reached the projection part of the takedown. I ignored it like I always did, otherwise it devolved into circular arguing that just took up more of my time. You know, you can't stay up there forever. I crossed my arms. When was the last time you peed? I checked the time on my phone. 10 a.m. You probably had a lot of coffee this morning, right? Or are you a tea person? Maybe a little witchy kombucha. They made that vinegar piss for everything now. Skin. Wait. Luck. Love. You had to drink a lot for the magic to work though. Lydia squirmed, realized I'd noticed, then gave a feral screech that put banshees to shame. She ripped open another box of Montster O's and hurled the contents at me by the handful. The individual charms were smaller, lighter, and came closer than the box she'd thrown before. I had to move, and déjà vu brought up a lot of bad memories all at once. This wasn't the first time Lydia Petty had thrown things at me. Senior year, her sleaze of a boyfriend had kissed me and she'd blamed me, much like she was doing now. Back then, mind your business years ago, she'd nailed me with an acne hex and a drooling narcolepsy curse followed by a black eye courtesy of her fist. Attacking me with orgasms was a new one though. The big O was usually an intangible thing. Magic had not changed human physiology. At least not yet. No one laid golden eggs while getting plowed. I wished, because that would then be my new job. However, magic could pack orgasms into black market sexual pleasure charms. That was Lydia's specialty, but selling magic to humans, even if it was full of pleasure, was a no-no on both sides. Soups didn't want humans to have any magic, and human law expressly forbade trafficking our powers among that population. Why was that my problem? Why was I sweating myself into heat stroke? Oh right. She'd been caught and then failed to show up for court. My job was to take her back in for another attempt to get the court thing right. Bounty hunting for the Triad, the inter-supernatural council that oversaw all things magic, hadn't been my first or last choice of careers. Due to circumstances beyond my control, I'd fallen into it the way a sinkhole swallows cars. The pay was shifter shit, but at least it was never boring. Case in point, I had this high school mean girl reunion with a side of sexual assault going for me today. When I said the job was never boring, I actually meant it was way too interesting. Supernaturals were an inventive bunch. It was exhausting. Although, maybe I'd get some satisfaction from cuffing the woman who'd single-handedly made my last year of high school a living hell. I brightened, suddenly feeling optimistic even as summer sweat trickled down my jeans and pooled in the back of my knees. Ooh. Now that was an idea I could get on board with. Grimoire Daily, the online hub of witchery, did say how you felt about life all depended on your perspective. They also said you should grow up and let things go. Huh. Decisions. Guess which one I went with? I am not going to jail. Lydia picked up another box of Montster charms and threw them at me by the handful. I jumped back and narrowly missed being beamed in the forehead. The round charms clattered to the floor like hail, and I tap-danced around them, not wanting to step on one and activate it. These were made for the human market, which meant they discharged on contact, no magic required. I couldn't afford the distraction of mind-numbing pleasure. Her receptionist wasn't so lucky though. Several charms nailed her in the face and hands, audibly popping as they went off. Oh. No. She dropped to her knees, eyes wide with horror as her body spun out of control. I tried to feel sorry for her and failed. She worked for a criminal mean girl. She'd chosen her fate. Also, that had to feel pretty good. Multiple O's like that could really rock someone's world, and I'd heard Lydia made quality stuff. Too bad it was illegal. Lydia, I kept my voice calm and measured, hoping to bring down her manic energy. Call your lawyer. Come with me, and we can wrap this up in a couple of hours. This doesn't have to be a big deal. Another pro tip, the more they freaked out, the calmer you needed to be. It's a neurological thing I never quite understood, but it worked. Sometimes. But it is a big deal, Worm. This is a feminist issue, you know. Lydia was elbow deep in another box, this one unmarked. She produced what looked to be a long but floppy stick of something. I did nothing other than provide a much-needed service to all of humanity. She brandished her stick in my general direction, and it wobbled to and fro like a dowsing rod. I should have stayed on topic, but I had to ask, what is that? This is a dildo charm to provide toe-curling orgasms. She smiled and whipped it at me. I jumped back again as it hit the cement floor with a loud thwap. By the first witch's tit, Lydia, you're selling charmed sex toys too? I shouldn't have been surprised. If she'd cared about rules, she wouldn't have hexed me before she even had her magic license. The other kids had called me wet pizza face and drew on me with markers every time I nodded off. My mom eventually neutralized the charms when she realized I couldn't hack it, but the name had stuck, until I'd failed my magic licensing exam when they'd switched to a different, just as awful nickname. It's a new line. Hasn't even launched yet. She winged more dildos my way, and suddenly it was raining big floppy dicks. Furthermore, she kept talking. I didn't let you bail me out, and I am not going to let you, the worst witch to ever witch, be the one who takes me in. Her face twisted with loathing, revealing what she really thought of me. Big surprise there. Someone alert the media. Maybe they could find someone who would be shocked. More dildos flew, but her words hurt more. In the yearbook under my picture, it read Sylvie Orion, world's worst witch. Guess who'd been yearbook editor? I thought I'd let all that go, but Lydia was stirring it back up like bitter coffee grounds. They say what I'm doing is a misuse of magic. She made a gagging sound of disgust. But they let you walk around like you belong here. You're still a huge pile of steaming nothing, aren't you? I swallowed my emotions. At the end of the day, this was business. Old feelings needed to stay locked up like good little gremlins, or only come up when I drank too much witch wine. Scanning the warehouse, I considered my options. With all the boxes on the top shelf, Lydia had a nuclear arsenal of sex magic. It would be a while before she ran out of ammunition. She had to come down sooner or later, but how did I finagle sooner without having a lot of, no doubt, great orgasms? I fingered my charm bracelet, looking at what I had left. Unlike other witches, I had to buy my magic, which limited my options. Lydia hadn't been wrong with that worst witch line. If she'd asked her no-good boyfriend about it in high school, she would have found out he'd only sweet-talked me on a dare. A dud witch was never a hot commodity in my world, no matter how curvilicious her curves, but for teen boys obsessed with boobies, she sure was fun to hassle. I bit my lip. Focus, Sylvie. The past is past. My bracelet held a couple power boosters, a sneeze affliction, and a time freeze. The last one I only used when I was desperate. Boosters were cheap, pranks like sneezes even cheaper, but time freezes were strictly regulated, which drove up the price. The only reason I could even enter the monthly lottery for them was because of my bounty hunting license. Now the test for my bounty hunting license, that one I'd passed. Look at you. Lydia cackled. You can't even arrest me. You're so lame. I looked up to see Lydia holding a phone. Wait. Are you filming this? I resisted the urge to pat my hair. It was too sweat-soaked to fix anyway. She smiled and nodded. Live streaming, biatch. Put the phone down. You are not filming this. I don't consent. She ignored me and talked to the phone. Hey everyone, remember Sylvie Orion? She sucks just as much as ever. Let's teach her not to cross her betters. She pulled a wand out of her cleavage, and still holding the phone in one hand, she began an incantation. She was going to curse me. Again. Oh hell no. I wasn't the pushover, low self-esteem lost cause I'd been in high school. Back then having bad magic had been new and terrible, but I'd since adjusted. My magic might be made of nothing, but I was a decent bounty hunter. I brought in dragons, warlocks, vampires. You named it, I'd cuffed it. The wheel had spun. The law of karma was coming in hot. Lydia Petty was going down, and I would be the one yelling timber. I activated the time freeze, saying the incantation faster than an auctioneer. It hit and cut off whatever Lydia had been about to do to me. In less than a second, she was a statue. So was the receptionist. Everything just stopped except for me. Perfect. I'd hit the easy button on my day, and it was working just as I'd planned. But now I had a new problem. She'd frozen like rigor mortis 10+ feet higher than me, and I only had 20 minutes to get her down and slap on cuffs before she hit the timeline again. I knew should have bought a levitation charm. That would have worked. There was no way I could carry her. I was a witch, not a fireman. I set the timer on my phone to give me a 2-minute warning and scouted the warehouse for something I could use. Out on the shipping dock, I found a tow motor with a couple of pallets already loaded. I had no idea how to drive one, but hoped I could learn in 60 seconds or less. Praise the first witch and any goddesses up there listening, the engine started okay, and it drove similar to a car. The hard part was keeping track of the fork prongs in front of the thing, or whatever they called them. I knocked over a stack of pallets, sitting on the shipping dock trying to master it. More orgasms spilled out. At this rate, no one would be able to set foot in the warehouse without a happy ending. In fits and starts, I got the tow motor in position next to the shelving unit holding Lydia. I hit the button that moved the prong thingies up to their maximum height. That put the top of the pallets about a foot under her dangling feet. I could work with that. I wiped the sweat off my palms and climbed up to where she sat. With a gentle shove, I toppled her over, dropping her onto the pallets below. I held my breath, not knowing if the tow motor could bear the extra weight, and realizing too late that I'd failed to account for any accidental rolling. Oops. I didn't want to kill her, because then she wouldn't wake up and feel the humiliation of my handcuffs. Hand-delivering karma was the true payday for this gig. I'd hate to miss it. Fortunately, she didn't roll off the pallet, but rather landed with the heavy inertia of the unconscious. The tow motor shuddered at the added load, but it held. I climbed back down, lowered the pallet, pulled her off the top, propped her up against the shelving and slapped my cuffs on her. I checked my phone. 10 minutes to spare. I did a little jig of victory for about 2 seconds before the heat got to me. Not only was it summer, the warehouse wasn't air-conditioned. I had my own soggy weather system going down my pants, and soon my jeans were going to drip sweat like rain. I went back to the break room I'd passed on my way in and snagged some cold water from the fridge. There was a massive display of different sex charms against the wall. I perused the options and pocketed a few Montster charms that were safely contained inside commercial packaging. Maybe they'd come in handy later. Maybe they'd just collect dust on a shelf. Maybe, and this last one was more likely, Blart, my fur-for-brains familiar, would eat them and have all the fun. Time would tell. Although even the first witch would have put her money on Blart. Lydia woke up at the 20-minute mark right on the dot, and I hoisted her to her feet. If you give me your lawyer's number, I'll call and have them meet you at the police station. She glared at me and started up on the curse again. I call on the Dark Dominion. Lydia, stop. I can have you muted. It would take a mountain of paperwork, but the triad backed up my official capacity with some hefty punishments. Case in point, I could strip a witch of magic for a month if they didn't obey the law. She kept going. Dark demons, hear my plea. By bone and blood bring death and destruction. Power pulsated against my skin, throbbing like a deep bass. I shook it off. Seriously? You're trying to kill me now? Fine. I'll shut you up another way. The charm on my cuffs wouldn't hold her long if she could raise that much bad juju with just a few words. Time for Plan B. I liked Plan B, it was fun. I pinched the sneeze charm on my bracelet, rendering it to dust, and blew it in her face. Being a prank, it didn't take an incantation, just some air to move it in the right direction. She started sneezing too much to keep up with the curse, and whatever power she'd raised went poof. I sneeze, 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 won't sneeze, 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 forget this. She evil-eye glared at me as snot streamed from her nose along with tears. I grabbed her phone, which had landed on the pallets too, and checked to see if it was still live streaming. It was. I held it up. Say hello to all your friends, Lydia. She shrieked and sneezed at the same time and tried to headbutt me. I dodged her snot-covered face and dropped her phone in the process. I stepped on it too. Mostly by accident. Mostly. The screen crunched. Oops. Sorry about that. Didn't anyone tell you? A life of crime is hell on phones. Okay, that was a little bitchy even for me. I'd make amends to the goddess later. For now, I grabbed her by the elbow. Let's find out if they have tissues in jail, shall we? Things went smoothly after that. The fight seemed to go out of Lydia. Or perhaps she was just too busy sneezing. I loved those sneeze charms. They kept my skip traces off balance and made my job easy. I shoved her into my old school hearse. Don't judge, coffin wheels were cheap and I was on a budget. Lydia gave my hearse a scorching look of disapproval between sneezes. I'd had covered the fading upholstery with poop emoji seat covers. Be nice, it was on sale. The organizer on the hump between seats overflowed with all my bounty hunting tricks of the trade. Zip ties, duct tape, first aid, you named it, I probably had it somewhere. I shoved Lydia into the passenger seat, and she cringed when her fancy designer stilettos made contact with the overflowing garbage can I kept on the passenger side floor. Hey, we can't all be criminals making millions. If you want a limo, get arrested in California or Vegas. Old limos were cheaper than hearses out west, although most bounty hunters preferred SUVs. However, per our industry newsletter, 3% of bounty hunters had limos. 10% had hearses because it made it easier to transport vamps. The rest had the money for nicer wheels and just rented trucks to transport vamps. Maybe in a few years, I'd make enough for nice wheels and truck rentals too. Lydia rolled her eyes and managed a snort between sneezes. I fastened the seatbelt over Lydia, careful to avoid the spray from her sinuses. Then I settled into the driver's seat. Before I put the hearse in drive, I covered Lydia's mouth with duct tape, just in case the sneeze charm wore off. Mission accomplished. But my day wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Bounty hunting was always either really busy or deader than the people who'd previously traveled in my hearse. There was no in-between. If my day started out busy, it stayed busy, and today was no different. On my way out of the police station after dropping off Lydia, I ran into Detective St. John, the liaison assigned to me by the mayor of Cleveland. "Hey, Orion. You got a minute?" He waved at me with a large hand. St. John ran tall and wide but not fat. No, he was all muscle. He was also fairly nice to me, and sometimes even helpful. Humans could be prickly around supernaturals. Cops in particular seemed to not like soups much, but St. John struck me as too pragmatic for hate. "Yeah, sure. What's up?" We stepped to the side, away from the stream of traffic coming in and out of the station. "I've got a tip for you." "Yeah?" "Sheridan Thorne didn't show for court today." I groaned and rolled my eyes. I knew that werewolf would be trouble. He'd fought me hard. I'd had to use my taser on him, and finally elephant tranked him when he wouldn't calm down. That was just to complete the bond that released him from jail. I didn't want to think about what he would do when I tried to take him back. "Are you serious?" St. John nodded. "I went to the hearing to monitor the case, and he never showed. I figured you'd want to know. His bond was pretty big." "Yeah. It was. 50 Gs. I ran my hand through my hair and sighed. Thorne had robbed several antique stores and assaulted quite a few cops during his subsequent arrest. The courts didn't like soups who hit back. The cops had tacked on every charge they could find. That's what happened when you put Cleveland's finest in the hospital. Luckily no one had died, although I doubted Thorne saw it that way. St. John cleared his throat. "Let me know if you need anything." I gave a friendly smile. I wanted St. John to like me. "Thanks. I appreciate it." Someone called St. John's name and he turned away. "I've gotta go. Got a meeting with the chief." My third eye sent out a tingle that crawled up my spine and flicked the back of my skull. I wasn't one to have premonitions, but every now and again I got an inkling. "Everything okay?" "It's just those foo." My hand shot out before I'd even registered that I'd moved, and I pressed my fingers against his lips. "Don't say that word." His eyes went wide. "You mean foo?" I pressed harder. "Yes, that one." He raised his hands in surrender, and I removed my fingers from his lips. "Okay. I won't say it, but why?" "It originates with the goddess Freya. You're invoking bounty and fertility." His eyebrows went up. "Fertility. It multiplies things, and the way you were using it, you were multiplying your troubles." He pursed his lips and gave a slow nod. "Freya, huh? Never heard of her. I thought it was all first witch with you guys." Freya frig freaking and you know the F word. I reduced centuries of magical language development to a few words. And first which is history. Freya's more of a spiritual thing. I tried to keep it simple. Yes, the first witch was a big deal for all of witchdom. She'd brought magic to the world and made the first vampire and first shifter. The goddess stuff was about feeling and focusing magic and tapping into whatever mysterious magic made the universe twinkle. Well, I don't believe in your spiritual thing. He made air quotes with his fingers. And I'm not a soup, so foo. I pinched his lips shut and glared at him in warning. You're in the presence of a witch. Be careful what you invoke. I let a touch of magic buzz from my fingers to his mouth. I couldn't bring the big guns, but I could zip and zap here and there. He held up his arms again and I backed off. Sorry. I didn't realize how serious it was. No problem. Now I held up my hands. No harm, no foul. He nodded and gave me a we're good smile. So if you can't say that, what do you say then? Duck. Duck this, duck that. Motherducking, I waved a hand, whatever. Like autocorrect? He chuckled. I just shrugged. Why do you think autocorrect does it? His eyes widened as understanding dawned. Oh. For real? For real, I echoed. So what were you about to say? I held up a finger. But without the F word this time. There's a weird string of murders. They want me to look at it and decide if it needs to go to the triad. Are soups involved? He shook his head. We don't have any evidence pointing to soups. Just weird shadows with red spots on surveillance footage. Like they're wearing hats. Another tingle skittered up my spine. I rolled my shoulders to counteract it. I'd give it to the triad. That seemed to make the tingle happy, because it faded. His gaze searched my face, suddenly calculating. Why do you say that? Do you know something? St. John. A harsh voice barked the detective's name. Get your ass in here. Hold that thought. I'll catch up with you later. St. John pointed a finger at me. I do want an answer to that question. Yeah, sure. Call me. I waved as he hurried off. I had hurrying of my own to do. There was no telling how much of a head start Thorne had on me. Sometimes people planned meticulous escapes, other times it was a last-minute attempt to dodge reality. I'd have to activate his tracking charm and see how far he'd gone. To date, no one had gone farther south than Georgia or farther west than Illinois, but I kept hoping someday I'd get a skip trace who made it to Paris. Then I could expense the whole trip. Maybe I'd take some of those monster O's along for fun. Paris was the city of love, right? Some sex magic atop the Eiffel Tower sounded like a plan to me. Oh, I could send Lydia a postcard. I'd heard mail was a morale boost for prisoners. For now, it was time to hunt. No way would I let Sheridan Thorne get away. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this quick taste of Sylvie. The next book, Motherducking Witches, is available in ebook now and will be out as an audiobook soon. Motherducking Witches is a full-length novel, and it continues the story from here.